All right, so today I thought I would talk about a Russian classic that is lesser known in the Anglophone community. And if you're new here, I am a PhD student. I research Russian literature, and I have this channel where I talk about what I'm reading at the moment, what I think people should read, and I try to share some of my expertise with you all. So, without further ado, let's get into the novel Oblomov by Ivan Goncharov. Now, I read the novel in the original Russian, but a few translations exist. As a rule with translations, I recommend people try out a few by reading previews online and see what kind of resonates with them or feels the most natural. Now, Oblomov is about a man who does absolutely nothing. He's the quintessential superfluous man. Now, this is a trope that's very common to Russian literature. It was used by countless writers, but the most famous I can think of is Goncharov and, of course, Ivan Turgenev. But again, it comes up again and again. And so the superfluous man is essentially a man of aristocratic birth who has no real occupation in life. He contributes nothing to society. He has no goal, no aim other than to enjoy his life. It is the pinnacle of this kind of selfish existence. And it's not necessarily an evil existence, it's just a condition like any other. And Oblomov is kind of the archetype for this. And he has been called, I don't know, this embodiment of the Russian spirit or the Russian soul. And I want to talk a little bit about what that might mean in this context. So, how about I start off with reading a quote? Here it is. History, too, depressed Oblomov terribly. You learn and read that at a certain date the people were overtaken by all sorts of calamities and were unhappy. Then they summoned up their strength, worked, took infinite care, endured great hardships, labored in preparation for better days. At last they came. One would think history might take a rest, but no. Clouds gathered again, the edifice crashed down, and again the people had to toil and labor. The bright days do not remain, they fly, and life flows on, one crisis follows upon another. Oh, I mean, just how relatable is that? What a accurate depiction of history. I think there's so much in this novel for us today, like from climate change to war to constantly being fed this kind of distressing information on social media and on the news. We are so overwhelmed with catastrophe that we find it hard to act and take action. And that is exactly what Oblomov suffers from. It is overwhelm. His condition, which they call in the novel Oblomovitis in English, is this kind of condition of overwhelm that becomes apathy. And I think just so many people suffer from exactly that today. And just seeing it depicted, I think that this is a strategy Russian writers sometimes use a lot, but if the book is boring, it's kind of supposed to be. Like if parts seem boring or monotonous, there actually is a purpose. And like in this novel, I found there were times where I was like, why is this all being described? Like, what does this lead to? And then it always comes back. And there's this kind of these satisfying threads that are woven. And so I would urge people to stick it through with this novel beyond part one. It gets a lot better after part one because in that part, we're just kind of being introduced to the protagonist, to his lazy life, to the kind of different archetypes that were existing in Russian society at the time. Um, but it's only really in part two that things start to kick off. Now, I think I ought to say a word about the two secondary characters of this novel, and that is a young woman named Olga, and a half German, half Russian man named Stolz. So, Stolz is a businessman, and he's imbued with all the typical, stereotypically German traits of like having, I don't know, being business savvy and just prosperous and very orderly. But then he also is half Russian, so he possesses this poetic, questing spirit. And he is the childhood best friend of Oblomov and also, of course, the antithesis of him. So through the secondary character, we get a foil and we get this kind of almost solution to the Oblomovitis that we see. But once again, Goncharov, like the reason he's so good is that he resists giving us a neat and tidy solution to this condition of overwhelm turned into apathy. And Olga is a young lady that Stoltz charges with curing Oblomov. He goes, "Hey, like here's my friend. He's really depressed. I'm trying to bring him back into society, back into the world, so he can find his purpose. Like, do you think you can help him?" And that desire to help blossoms into a pretty important relationship. But things in this novel, they take lots of twists and turns. So it's not really until the end, until you have a very kind of, I don't know how to put it, cohesive understanding of what Goncharov is doing here. Now, I think a solution that is presented in this novel, and that's why it's worth reading, a solution to this condition of, again, overwhelm turned apathy, is the refusal to accept things as they are. Stoltz has this refusal, and Oblomov doesn't. He accepts things the way they are, even if they're not perfect, even if they're horrible, even if they promote oppression of others. He accepts the status quo, and that is his flaw. That is why he isn't able to fulfill his potential. And I won't spoil whether he manages to fulfill his potential or not, since that's kind of the central question this novel poses. But it really, like, I genuinely found it inspirational. I feel like I put down the book and I felt really determined to try to make a difference in at least my immediate environment, my community, in my case, like my school. Um, if not, if you can't change the whole world. Because I think Oblomov's problem is he thinks he's powerless, he can't change societal structures, he wouldn't even know how to begin to do that. And he feels so paralyzed by everything, so anxious that he ends up just doing nothing. And that's his solution. And it's not a solution, it's a non solution. Of course, it can't be. And I just really think I found it. I was shocked to find it relatable. I really opened this novel and thought it was going to be a bore just based off part one. And I also thought it was going to be much more about the relationship between the master and his servant. And that is a part of the novel, but it's not the whole thing. Um, so yeah, I've definitely rambled on long enough about it, but I really encourage people to give it a try. And if you do, please, please, please comment and let me know what you thought of it. Let me know if you've heard of this novel, if you're familiar with it. I am genuinely curious. Let me know if you've read it, liked it. And if you have any ideas for future books you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment. I will probably get back to you and I'll probably film whatever you request. You might know that I am currently studying for one of my PhD comprehensive exams, which is going to be on the whole of 19th century Russian literature. So I'm currently rereading some Dostoevsky, so I'm happy to make a video about him. I'm happy to make a video about Chekhov. Any 19th century writers you can think of, I'll probably get to them. So just feel free to let me know what you're interested in. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.